It has now been nearly 5 months since President Trump has taken office. In that time, we've seen the president issue more than 140 executive orders and make sweeping changes to the federal government. In order to see how voters in New England have felt about these changes, a group of Globe editors and reporters have come together to survey a focus group of voters in a special recurring feature called Voter Vibes. In part 2 of this series, we'll be focusing on immigration. Recently, social media has been flooded with videos of masked ICE officers aggressively arresting migrants and foreign students in the streets, including Tufts University student Ramesa Ozturk, in broad daylight on a sidewalk in Somerville. Plus, hundreds of men have been sent to a notorious prison in El Salvador. And although some recent polling shows most Americans want tighter borders, how the Trump administration has gone about it has shocked voters across the political spectrum.
Everybody's read the stories or seen the TV clip of the kid who came to America with his or her family, overcame language and other economic and other hardships to become the valedictorian of his or her class. It happens all the time, and it's a testament to our country's greatness.
I think immigrants have to be educated in our culture and that we should not have to change our beliefs and cultures to, make them happy.
I'm Jasmine Aguilera, and this is The Globe. In this episode, we'll hear from 7 respondents: 48-year-old Ivan Sanchez from Johnston, Rhode Island, 66-year-old Daryl White from Skowhegan, Maine, 37-year-old Justina Perry in New Bedford, Massachusetts, 54-year-old Karen Sisson from Londonderry, New Hampshire, 24-year-old Ruth Bristol from Somerville, Massachusetts, 56-year-old Brian Jenkins from Sutton, Massachusetts, and 41-year-old Vanessa Coppola from North Yarmouth, Maine. Let's start with Ivan Sanchez. Now, Ivan has been a Democrat all his life, but in the last election he voted for Donald Trump because he thought Trump would be better for the economy. He's Mexican-American, born in New York City, and moved to Rhode Island at 12 years old. Now he's the owner of 4 businesses: a grocery store, a food distributor, a taco shop, and an automotive store.
I have several businesses, and I could say I'm staying afloat. I don't feel it bad, but we all expected it to be, real good, I guess, within the first quarter with the new president and with all the tariffs that he's implying on, pretty much in the whole world. We don't see any end soon. Makes everybody hold back from investing.
In the last survey, he listed his top issues as the economy and immigration, and those are still his top issues. This time, he tells reporter Omar Mohammed that he's still the most concerned with the economy, but also feels the changes in immigration policy affecting his community directly and has noticed the uptick in ICE raids.
I haven't seen anything myself, but I see it online. I see it in the news, the local news, the Spanish news, the Latino news channel. It's happening. His first term, he wasn't that aggressive with the immigration issue, so I wasn't too concerned. I thought it was going to be about the same level of, ICE raids or whatever from back then, from the first term that he served. But now we notice that he did come aggressive. A lot of people getting detained, a lot of people getting deported. Quick example, I know somebody, a friend of ours, he has a worker's permit. He got detained. He was locked up for a couple months, and he saw the inside and said that a lot of people getting arrested on just like minor charges, or maybe they have the wrong person, wrong last name or wrong middle name or whatever. And that's what happened to my friend. But regardless, he had to pay almost over 20 grand to bail him out. And he's still going to court. And he tells me a lot of these people that are getting arrested, they don't have a lot of money to bail out, and they don't have the money to pay for the lawyers. And so, yeah, this time around, definitely Donald Trump came very aggressive with that. And a lot of them don't take the due process. It kind of feels like the martial law. They're just trying to grab people and get them out of here, get them detained, get them deported, and ask questions later. But a lot of people getting deported, and they're not even at fault. I don't agree with anything that he's done so far.
Ivan was one of the many Latino men who voted for Trump in 2024, a demographic that swung right in record numbers. And many of those Latino first-time voters cited the economy and cost of living as their reason for their vote. And yet, 5 months in, Ivan says he hasn't supported anything President Trump has done this term. But another first-time Trump voter, Daryl White, up in Skowhegan, Maine, supports President Trump's efforts so far. Daryl is a white independent voter. He's 66 years old and a director at a nonprofit, and a conservationist. His voting history is a mixed bag. In earlier elections, he wrote in candidates rather than vote for a Democrat or a Republican candidate. But in 2024, he voted for Trump. He says mostly as a vote against Democrats at that time. In the last Voter Vibe survey, his top 3 issues were immigration, the economy, and media censorship. This time, his top issue is still immigration.
Well, I certainly have supported his efforts on immigration, and I find it highly conspicuous that he was able to essentially resolve, the massive influx so quickly. It just speaks to the prior situation and not a good light at all. Kind of hard to understand the level of that failure. So, I think that's been good. I'm unsure on a couple of fronts. I mean, stuff gets embellished in the media. I have not been to the Texas or New Mexico border, but I did follow some people like Tulsi Gabbard and Robert Kennedy when they went down there, and, they were giving us firsthand reports, and hopefully they were genuine. The reports we had were just massive amounts of illegal immigration, unchecked. There's a number like 50,000 criminals, whatever. Do I know that that's a fact? No. And now I'm hearing that it's, we're talking hundreds of people a day instead of tens of thousands a day. Huge success. I certainly believe in immigration. It's just, there's a reason we have laws around it. We should follow the laws. I think immigration is for the betterment of the country, but if it's not, then why? So yeah, I think that's good. And then as far as the deporting, I'm one for the checks and balances, and I'm certainly glad that there are mechanisms to resist. But at the same time, like let's just say if there's 50,000 illegals who are criminals that were let through, to process them under the guise of due process, how many years would that take? So I don't think it's outlandish that it's been done under the guise of a national emergency. I forget what it was called.
President Trump has long characterized the flow of immigrants to the U.S. as a crisis in need of emergency action. This term, he has invoked the use of the Alien Enemies Act, a law written in 1798 that grants the government the right to deport or detain citizens of countries that are currently at war with the U.S. Last Friday, May 16th, the Supreme Court issued a ruling that extended a freeze on deportations under the Alien Enemies Act.
I'm glad there's a balance to that. I'm glad there are checks. But, at the end of the day, I think people need to ask themselves, what hill are you standing on? Is this really about our democratic principles, or is it just politics? Because, it's potentially a huge problem. Crime and people have died, been murdered, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, hopefully this is all headed in the right direction.
But reporter Omar Mohammed got a very different response from our next voter, down in New Bedford, Massachusetts. 37-year-old Justina Perry has been a Democrat since she registered to vote at 18 years old. She's the mother of 2 kids, a 5-year-old and a 5-month-old. She says she's part of the 92% of Black women who voted for Harris, who she says are this country's conscience. And in the last survey, she was most concerned about what she thinks is hostility towards democratic institutions and how hate has been normalized. At the time of the first survey, she was most concerned over access to affordable health care. And now she's concerned with student loans, the education system, and the economy. But lately, with all the news around immigration, Justina feels that there is an emergency, but for the Constitution. When we asked her about how she felt about President Trump's immigration policies, she pointed to international students like Ramesa Ozturk, who have been detained for their opinions rather than any outright illegal activity. She feels President Trump and his administration are treading on the provisions set clearly in the Constitution.
He's dangerous. I mean, it's a constitutional crisis. That's how I feel like. Our country needs immigrants. We need a better system in place for when people do arrive. And I don't agree with deporting people and everything that's happening right now. I don't agree with that. But when we put somebody in the office, right, who's been alleged of 91 felonies, we can expect him to break the law. So there's nothing that I can say I support that he's done. I think his time so far is a catastrophe. And with the actions that he's taken, I see him leading the world into more racism, more xenophobia, more climate destruction, inequities. What the administration is doing is testing the limits of the Constitution, testing the president's authority. And I think that it's also in an effort to undermine universities and college. And if you think differently than this administration, you'll be punished.
After the break, we'll hear from more voters. Stay tuned. Hey there. I want to take a minute to tell you about another Boston Globe podcast you might want to check out, Mr. 80%, a mini-series hosted by entertainment reporter Mark Shanahan. It came out in 2020, but it is relevant all over again this week after former President Joe Biden disclosed his diagnosis of aggressive prostate cancer. Mr. 80% is a deeply personal, sometimes harrowing, often funny, always true story about prostate cancer, a disease that affects him and millions of other men. With bracing candor and an eye for the absurd, Mark confronts cultural attitudes about masculinity, controversies surrounding screening and treatment, and his own biggest fear, that his diagnosis would wreck the healthy sex life he enjoyed with his wife. Part memoir, part journalistic investigation, Mr. 80% is a heartfelt and helpful resource for men and their families touched by prostate cancer. Check it out wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back. Over in Londonderry, New Hampshire is Karen Sisson, a 54-year-old white independent voter. She's a former housing inspector who voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016, but then voted for Trump in 2020 and 2024 because of how good the economy was during his first term. She recently lost her job, she told reporter Omar Mohammed, because her employer feared federal funding cuts and believes there's more economic pain to come. She thinks it's a temporary and necessary pain that will lead to better things. In our last survey, Karen's top issues were the economy and prejudice, but she didn't elaborate on what kind of prejudice. This time, though, she said her top issues are gay rights, the economy, and immigration. And on immigration, she feels conflicted about how the Trump administration is handling things.
I think that it'll cause a temporary shortage of workers. I do not agree with the way ICE is handling things. I think they are scaring American people, and I think that's wrong. I do not like the way ICE is handling it, to go wait outside churches and grocery stores and, go after people for their color of their skin or something and harass the American people, I think is wrong. And they're scaring people. They're scaring people so people aren't even going grocery shopping now. But Biden had the open doors for anyone that wanted to come into the country. A lot of the states were scrambling to try to find housing when we can't even house our own. I think immigrants have to be educated in our culture and that we should not have to change our beliefs and cultures to, make them happy. Let's talk Christmas. For somebody not to be able to say Merry Christmas because it might offend somebody that's from another country. Well, no, this is what America was all about. And in God we trust. Oh, well, you can't have God in schools anymore. I think that's all downfall. And I think Trump is trying to bring that all back and make it more of our country again.
Despite Karen's conflicted feelings over aggressive ICE raids, she still supports President Trump's reasons for his focus on immigration. But 24-year-old Democrat Ruth Bristol in Somerville, Massachusetts, completely disagrees. She's white and works 2 jobs, one at a local grocery and another as a tour guide. She told reporter Omar Mohammed that she's most concerned with practical issues that affect her: minimum wage, housing, and social benefits. But she's also concerned about basic human rights and freedoms. During the first Trump presidency, when she was younger, she says it was bad back then, but more benign. Now she feels the second term has gone off the rails.
Yeah, I mean, the deportations that Trump has undertaken have been super public. There's all of these headlines about deporting children and deporting the wrong people and then not taking them back. Just these, pretty terrible instances of thoughtless deportations that people aren't getting due process. It's just working out really poorly. So it's overall being terrible. It's much more visible than whatever Joe Biden was doing, numbers wise. I don't know how different it is, but I think they're taking entirely different stances. If Joe Biden was, kind of middle of the road when it comes to immigration, not particularly liberal, but, not into building a wall. Trump is ridiculously over-exaggerated when it comes to protecting us from scary immigrants.
There were more deportations during President Biden's first term than President Trump's first term. Trump's second term, though deportations have been public and often aggressive, numbers-wise, they haven't significantly outpaced previous administrations, at least not yet, and in some ways have decreased compared to President Biden's term, because, in part, there are just fewer people entering the country than before, legally and illegally. And for our next voter, 56-year-old independent Brian Jenkins in Sutton, Massachusetts, however Trump is handling the issue, at least he's doing something. Brian voted for Trump 3 times. He's white and a father of 3 teenagers and works in banking. He told reporter Omar Mohammed that he is very concerned about the national debt and also about U.S. foreign policy with China. But immigration is also a top 3 issue for him because he thinks it's a problem that has gone on for too long.
Well, I don't feel under the Biden administration we had real attention paid to the border and that problem until it became election time and they saw it was certainly a hot button. And then all of a sudden they stopped the flow in from the border. I do believe that, again, it's been a problem for some time. It's been a can that's been kicked down the road and Congress hasn't really done their job. So the executive branch, and this happens a lot, I feel like our government is dysfunctional. Therefore, the executive branch tries to do more than they really should. And now we're in a situation where it's become more of an issue. And again, that's when you don't pay attention to things and just kind of kick it down the road. This is what happens, and it's what's going to eventually happen with the debt.
Reporter Sabrina Shankman heard a different kind of long-term concern from 41-year-old Vanessa Coppola, who lives in North Yarmouth, Maine. Vanessa feels that President Trump's current immigration policies show how democratic principles are at stake. She's the mother of 2 children, working as a business consultant, and her husband works in fundraising for a local college. She describes herself as progressive and worries about the long-term damage that she feels the Trump era has brought.
I'm concerned that we're casting, yet again, the other, in this case, immigrants, as the villain, and that if we just get rid of the other or eliminate the other, then we will be solving some of our problems, right? Mm-hmm. So beyond just the dehumanizing of the people who have come into our country seeking sanctuary, seeking opportunity, we're creating another bad guy, somebody to say, hey, this is the root of our problem. This is why you don't feel safe. This is why you don't have financial opportunity. People are committing egregious crimes against Americans. And so let's get rid of them and that will solve our problem in part. I just think that's incredibly problematic, big picture wise. And I think, again, beyond the dehumanization of these people who are being ripped out of their homes, ripped from their lives, pulled from their families, deported to other countries, in some cases not even their home country, without due process and without meeting the criteria that Trump has even outlined as the reasoning for deportation is deeply problematic to me. And the idea that we can, as a country, be implementing some of these changes without any due process. I think a lot of that is being pushed to the side in this idea of mass deportation.
And so, on immigration, we've heard quite a lot of skepticism and alarm about the Trump administration's immigration policies. And yet, some Trump voters still support the president's goals, even if the execution has felt aggressive. Before we let our voters go, our reporters asked every respondent to quantify President Trump in this moment as a rank on a scale of 0 to 100, 0 being terrible and 100 being perfect. Here's what 48-year-old Ivan Sanchez said.
I'm going to go with and I'm being conservative, maybe 20%, if that.
Here's what independent voter Daryl White up in Maine said.
I'm going to give him a 75. And I would just, I have an asterisk because it's just, I don't know because of all of the different, the inertia and everything else.
And 37-year-old Justina Perry in New Bedford, Massachusetts said,
Yeah, pretty poor, somewhere below a 5, and I'll leave room for a little further.
And New Hampshire independent Karen Sisson said,
I'd say 75.
And triple Trump voter Brian Jenkins in Sutton, Massachusetts said,
I would give him, I'd give him a 60 probably.
And 24-year-old Democrat Ruth Bristol of Somerville, Massachusetts said,
Probably a 1, just because I think that it could get worse. And so 0 would be the worst, and I think it will probably get worse. Don't want to offer any praise, but I do want to kind of prepare for that. So probably like a 1, maybe, if it's a scale of 0 to 100.
While Mainer Vanessa Coppola stuck with her original score.
A 0.
For more reporting on these voters and the other respondents not featured here, check out Globe.com for more. A link will be in the show notes. The Globe is hosted, produced, and sound designed by me and edited by Kristen Nelson. Special thanks to Globe editors Christina Silva, Anika Butler, Hillary Flynn, Tim Logan, Victoria McGrain, Ben Olivo, and Lila Alphonse. And Globe reporters Matt Stout, Didi Coley, Omar Mohammed, Ed Fitzpatrick, Stephen Porter, Anjali Huyn, and Sabrina Shankman. Christina Prignano and John Hancock were the graphic editors of this project. The editor of the Boston Globe is Nancy Barnes. I'm Jasmine Aguilera. Thanks for listening.